Hello, Gozo Scope, Gozo Nation, Periscope, Coffee Scope. How are you guys? Good morning. This is an awesome day. And just thank you for joining us here on Gozo Scope Nation. My name is David Trigg, and every day, Monday through Friday, I talk about joy and anxiety and really about three things that, at least in my life, have worked. I used to be a very anxious young man growing up with anxiety that came from separation from my parents and from war in my native Nicaragua. And now I am a pastor, I am an entrepreneur, I have my own business called Gozo, G-O-Z-O. I've been doing that since March of 2014. And I have my greatest success really has nothing to do with any of those things, but it's the fact that I am married to the love of my life, Rochelle, for 20 years. And together we have three amazing teenagers. Hello, welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much. And together we have three amazing teenagers. A 16-year-old named Canela, who's a model. A 14-year-old, also our girl, Isabella, who is the best singer in the house by far. And then our young boy, who's 12, almost 13, God help us, and he is a professional drummer. He actually plays in my CDs. I also record music. And that really is my greatest joy in life. And, you know, my desire is to be just simply another person that walks alongside of you at midlife, trying to figure out, at 46 years of age, I'm 46, and trying to figure out this new world of business and healing. Like many of you, I'm an empath, an Aries, a Falcon, an INFJ, and basically just a compassionate heart, like many of you that are trying to really give of yourselves in a way that is wholehearted, that is vulnerable, and that is really comes from your heart. And that is really my desire. And so every morning, I start with my coffee of the day. And so I have this awesome coffee. Yes. Oh, lost a connection. Okay. Thank you for hanging in there, Christine. I hope that you can come back here and stick around. Thank you so much for trying to connect. So every morning I have my coffee, and today I have my blend of the day, and I already heated it up, and I already mixed in some poison. Here's my poison, French vanilla. If you guys like that, oh man. And I already heated it up. As I say normally, I like to heat it up after I put in the poison, because you know it cools it off. So anyway, here it is. Let me see what today's mix tastes like. Ooh, first it's steamy hot, just the way I like it. Oh man, this is a good batch. Yummy. So, you know, today's topic is very kind of, I think, a bold statement. If you saw the title, is anxiety the new HIV/AIDS? And is Robin Williams our new Magic Johnson? Or, you know, however you want to put that. And here's what I want to talk about, okay? This is to me, a kind of a come to Jesus Gozoscope. Gozo, by the way, means joy. And so that's what I talk about. Thank you for inviting your followers, Christine. Thank you so much. Oh, there, look, Daisy the dog is back there. Hi, Daisy. Our dog is back there. She twisted her ankle the other day, so. I was listening to a podcast on death and dying, and basically the guru when it comes to the 7 stages of grief. And he was talking about grief, of course, and dying and the process. And he mentioned the AIDS epidemic of the 80s. And I mentioned this briefly on a Gozoscope last week, but I wanted to reiterate that again today to make it more into a point of discussion and hopefully of engagement with you and with our Gozo land, Gozo planet. the podcaster was saying that in the 80s, until Magic Johnson came on the scene, or until his announcement was made as an NBA player, as a, we're here in the Long Beach area, here in the LA area, so imagine he was just an icon. He still is. But until he went through what he went through, catching the HIV virus, and actually living to tell the story and living to tell about it, AIDS was still pretty much a kind of a non-topic, even though it was happening, and even though there was a lot of confusion, a lot of fear around it. It wasn't until Magic Johnson announced it publicly as an NBA player, beloved by thousands and millions of people worldwide, that this AIDS epidemic became a national concern. And so it got me thinking about anxiety and fear and depression and all of this mental health conversation that is bubbling up, or that is bubbling beneath the surface. And it got me thinking of how Robin Williams, in my opinion, is our Magic Johnson. If you remember Robin Williams, I mean, of course you remember him, but if you remember what happened, he committed suicide, I believe it was in 2014, about a year and a half ago, perhaps. Maybe if someone knows the exact date, you can let us know. And talk about an icon, beloved of all of us. Again, us in our 40s, I mean, Robin Williams was our hero. I mean, he was on Mork and Mindy. I didn't catch Mork and Mindy. I was too young. But, if you're a little bit older, you remember. But I think my first interaction with Robin Williams was his movies, Hook, and the one where, Peter Pan, I guess that's Hook. All of those movies, plus, I mean, Mrs. Doubtfire, all of his stand-up routine, the endless movies, primarily, right, that he was on. And I think it was everything about him. He was like our grandpa, right? He was like a father figure to many of us in terms of the comedy world. Someone who seemed safe, even though he was vulgar at times, off camera, but at least on camera, he was like a grandfather to us. And so when he dies of a mental health disease, Mork and Mindy, exactly. I know. I mean, the egg, come on, and the outfits, just classic images that we all grew up with, imprinted in our minds forever. Now, him being gone from depression, to me, he has become that Magic Johnson. Now, I don't think that that the mental health conversation is at the level that it needs to be. And remember, we're talking about very sensitive issues here, so nobody wants this to become a conversation. We would all rather this simply become something that is managed and taken care of. But until this topic of mental health and anxiety and depression and fear at the dinner, becomes normal at the dinner table, it won't get the funding, it won't get the support at the healthcare level, it won't get the support at the education level for our children, for you and for me, for the elderly, for the African American woman, for the Latino man, for whoever it may be. And instead, it will continue to be not only a sort of a stigma or a hush-hush conversation that happens behind the scenes or on a therapist couch, but it will continue to be super expensive and a privilege. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. We're talking about a condition that only the privileged can really manage. I went through 3 years of counseling every week. I spent over $10,000, $150 a session, to get better from trauma and childhood things that I mentioned. Now, there are people that will say to you, well, social services or this and that. And I'm not an expert, okay? But I do not know. Okay, well, actually, let me rephrase that. I do know of neighbors of mine who don't have the means to go to a therapist and who deal with schizophrenia and other, bipolar, other conditions. And because they're the wrong color, really, it doesn't even come down to color. I mean, I think there's familial and cultural things that deal with that or that affect that. But if you don't have the means, your only choices, if you ever get into a moment of crisis, is for the cops to come and a neighbor basically files a police report that only can be filed if that person actually harmed you. And then if that police report is filed, the only thing that a police officer can do is take you to jail or leave you at home. Those are the only two choices. So the only solution right now for mental health, if you cannot afford $150 of therapy for 3-5 years, which is what it takes to overcome these things, is to go to jail or to continue to be at home. Or, like many people, is to be homeless. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there are exactly these kind of rules, or laws and acts that are beginning to get online, exactly. Now, I was at the Saddleback Conference last year, just a couple of weeks ago, which was an amazing thing at the church faith level. So let's talk about how the church is responding, because as you know, a lot of people of faith, a lot of people in general will go to places of worship to look for mental health support, to look for, comfort and help and love. Now, from my Christian background, here is the reality of that. It's not good. That's all I can tell you. The church, for the most part, centers around one or two, extremes. And I've been a part and on staff and pastored and been on staff as a paid full-time member of both of these extremes. And there are others in between, but here's basically the two sides of the faith narrative or the faith response. Either you have a demon, and Matthew 6 says, do not be anxious. And so therefore there's something wrong with you, as in you do not have the faith, and that's why you're anxious. So that's not helpful. Or you have the other extreme of helping people at the social justice level and no real sustainable system that includes faith and that includes community, that includes love and grace, as well as support and tools and therapists that are affordable to help the person along. So you have these extremes. And that's why, to me, this conversation is still not at a healthy level. Like Jim Collins in the book, if you've read it, From Good to Great, he talks about a tipping point. How any theme, if you think about anything in life that has gotten better, any improvement, there has to be a tipping point. All these events that precipitate this tipping point. And on the other side of that tipping point is when creativity, innovation, and help really happens. As it's happened with the AIDS epidemic, as it's happened with breast cancer, as it's happened, to some degree with healthcare, although obviously people have different opinions on Obamacare. But if you think about it, anxiety, education, certainly education, there's, talk about the economic crises and banks and all that. There are so many of these kind of like dinosaurs that continue or that are still, you work in the panorama, we go, exactly, exactly. Come to us, yes. And I want to address the organic movement that is happening, I think that is the answer, because church, exactly. So you think of the extremes and you think of all these areas that still haven't reached a tipping point. So where is the hope? Where is the joy? Because again, this is the joy scope, the gozo scope. Well, I think like with Uber, and not to compare, taxis to mental health. Okay, so that's not where I'm going. My point is creativity and innovation. Exactly. I think, and you as well. I think all of us, we need like 30 of these shows, thousands. But yes, thank you so much. I think it's got to be where you and I write blogs about this, where you and I tell our stories on camera, being that obviously 12, 13-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds we're all online, and video is, I think, to me, the best way, whether it's Periscope or a blog or a podcast, whatever. It could be, how many entrepreneurs are there out there that are creating, all kinds of like organic food or organic creams? I have many family members that have amazing talents and skills to bring healing to people and are basically working 2-3 jobs to make this happen. Not just to make it financially, but to, again, create healing. And to me, that's what needs to happen in the area of mental health. We need to have 1,000 creative soldiers that are putting out amazing content, helping people, giving them the tools, whether it's an ebook, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a conference, whether it's music therapy, all of the above, whether it's health. And really, to me, it's about combining these things. It can't, because I think that the other danger that we as entrepreneurs can fall into is we all just have a little bit of a niche group. I have friends that deal with anxiety that are amazing at organic food. Exactly. It's not just about having like, hey, here's mine and good luck for, no. I'm here in Long Beach, as I mentioned. My nose itches, sorry. And I know like 5 or 6 amazing entrepreneurs that all of them deal with some sort of panic attack situation or anxiety, but they hide, I don't know if they hide it, but their product is in many ways trying to heal people. I know there's one friend who's trying to open a coffee house. The point is, we need to work as one. And that's really the vision behind this platform. My talent, by God's grace, I talk, I sing. But I would say something that I have that might be of service to somebody else is the gear that I have. By God's grace, I have thousands of dollars of gear. Don't come and steal it. I'm just messing. The point is, I am a computer science major. That's what I went to school with my undergrad. And then I studied leadership and theology in my graduate work. But my point is, in my undergrad, and not that education is everything, but point is, that's just where my brain goes. I love these mediums. And so my dream is to invite other voices into this Gozo platform, this Gozo network, to produce amazing content that I can't create. Exactly. And so, and to provide those even how-tos, because there's this book called not the War of Art, but the Art of War. No, maybe it's the other way. The War of Art. Yes, that's what I meant. That's the War of Art. How art, there's a war that goes with it. Speaking of fear, to be on camera, to write, to start a blog, to speak in front of a group, to talk to your husband about your anxiety. Because it's not just about being, quote, a creative online. This is really a conversation that needs to happen. So anyway, my point is that book, The War of Art, I keep confusing it. I think it's The War of Art, talks about resistance and how any creative endeavor is going to hit resistance. And that most of us think that resistance is a sign that we need to go back and stop. But in fact, resistance is what strengthens us to become the creatives and the healers that we know we are. And that process is magical. And I love helping people with that process and to find tools and to learn how to actually evaluate your own growth and to audit your own progress as a writer, as a person online, as a speaker. I've spoken in front of groups, thousands of groups, since I was 23 years of age. So for 23 years, basically half of my life, I've been speaking in front of people. And still I face resistance internally in here. Anyway, that's a whole different Periscope. And, I'd be good to eventually do some training on all these things. But my point is that, especially I think in this area of mental health, I invite you, and I'm going to post this video eventually on Facebook and all of my channels. What I do is I catch it, quote unquote, and I then, repurpose these videos. So even if you're not here live, but you're watching this, later this week on Facebook or Instagram or wherever this is going to be posted on YouTube, I invite you, put down a little bit of your own fear, your own platform even. I've had friends that say, well, I don't really want you to sell stuff on my platform because, people might go to you instead of me. Or, well, I don't want to really be on your show because I'm selling my own product. That's fine. I'm not advocating that we all, I don't know, live in the same house and have some communal living situation, okay? I'm not advocating that. All I'm advocating is that we help each other and that we find ways to come together. And because here it is, I need your help. I need your help if you're a nutritionist. If you, like I have a bad knee, I had ACL surgery 20 years ago, and I'm trying to get into CrossFit. You can be the one to help me with just some tips. I don't want to have surgery. The point is, we can all be vulnerable with each other. And most of all, have that vulnerability be a part of that tipping point. And I'm not talking about some sort of, like I said, some, hey, esoteric thing. No, you still have to sell your stuff. The best thing that we can do as business types or as entrepreneurs, creatives, is to stay in business. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Christine. I'm so glad. So glad. All of these interactions are just meant to be. Absolutely. And here it is. You don't have to be here in Long Beach, in LA. I don't know where you are, Christine. But, like I've spent 10,000 hours researching the new digital space. Again, because it's just where my mind goes. So a simple way that we can come together without being in the same room is through a webinar. Fort Lauderdale. Exactly. I have a friend who wrote a book called Anxious. She lives, where does Amy live? Chicago. Of course I have friends here in the area, of course. But I have a friend who lives, but see, even if they live in the area, some live in Pasadena, which is like an hour north of here. The point is we don't have to be in the same space. I do think that being in the same room is powerful, it's magical, because you have all the love and it just flows so well. And I've done a few shows. But even if we're in different rooms, we can all make money, quote unquote, by supporting each other, which again, the financial foundation has to be there. Although if I'm out of money, I stop. I can't pay my Wi-Fi. I can't pay this house. Meaning we have to have a financial plan. So that's a whole different conversation that I think is very important to have among creatives. Is how are you paying your bills? Not just right now, but in the next year, 3 years, 5 years. Maybe you're in your 20s. What's your plan? In your 30s, or for us in our 40s? It's like, well, how am I going to do this? So, etc. So that's a whole different thing. But I guess just to get back to my theme here of the tipping point and how AIDS has become exactly. I know you're into nonprofits, right? Yeah. Nonprofits to me are incredible. And nonprofits, I had one back in Denver, Colorado that I did for about 3 years. It was called My City Arvada. I lived in Arvada. Beautiful, beautiful work, mostly among schools and neighbors. Incredible work. And it's the same question. How does that nonprofit leader, exactly, anxiety, and see, that's the beautiful thing, right, Christine, is that if we exist as healers and as empaths to bring peace to your anxious soul, as I always say, it's about joy. That's why I do these scopes. That's why all my videos that I do and my podcasts and all the product that I'm putting out there in terms of like helping the anxious soul, I do that not just to make us less anxious. I'm doing it for the sake of the joy that is in you. And what do I mean by joy? 3 things I talk about. Adventure, so that you can live out your adventure, your nonprofit, so that you can find grace in your crisis. Because that's what gives you that sustained peace, is finding grace through anxiety. And then lastly, is to discover who you love. In other words, as you begin to get better from your anxiety, as you begin to heal from the trauma, from those moments of panic and of, sweating at night and clammy hands. And some people feel it on their shoulders. Some people feel it on their backs. Some people get heart palpitations. Some people, they get that tunnel vision where they can't see, past that fear. Some people get a spot on their hands or, something on their eyes, and they think it's colon cancer, even though it's their eye that hurts. I mean, I understand. As I said, I went through 3 years of solid therapy, empathic psyche. Exactly. You absorb the emotions because we're multisensory, because we're empaths, because we're indigos. We absorb, and we don't know yet how to develop those boundaries. And to me, I call it more of a film. To develop that film that can bring things in bring things in and letting them out. It's almost like a breathing mechanism. We breathe emotion. In many ways, we can't live without people's emotions. We would die without their emotions. But it's almost like a gill is another way to put it, a membrane, exactly. It's like a fish. I mean, it's a beautiful metaphor, of fish breathing in that amazing oxygen. This is getting good. Man, this is good, huh? I know. This is life-changing stuff. It's going to change your life, this video right here. I mean, it's just because this is truth. And so that water comes in through that gill of that fish, that shark, or of that, I don't know, something beautiful, a big, nice blue tuna, whatever your favorite fish is, something beautiful. Dora from Nemo. And then we breathe in that beautiful, we breathe in that beautiful water. You are crazy. You're remembering too many things. And then, we then exhale. But then we have to exhale. And that membrane, that film, that gill, has life. Someone needs to study this, okay? Like, if you're into fish, please study this and do a scope and link me to it. I want to learn all about how fish breathe. But from a poor man's opinion, that is what we need to do as empaths. And that's the progress that I've seen in my life. It's still a struggle because, again, water is life. But developing a firm and a strong membrane and gill, a system so that we can live and breathe and continue our journey. So that's the point of, as I was talking about the ACL experience, your adventure, finding grace in crisis, that's a C, discovering who you love, meaning what's my cost? Who is my cost? Who is that son or daughter? Exactly, I know, yes. Anxiety, depression, repression. So when it comes to repression, are you talking about, Christine, about not wanting to deal with it? Because that's something that is very common, obviously, of not wanting to go back there, or kind of working, hey, there's Daisy, my dog. You might see her big head back there. Hi, Daisy. Yes, exactly. So let me do another scope on that, because I want to kind of stay a little bit, but let me give you kind of my thoughts on the idea of repression. Again, from all that I have done, studied, etc. To me, exactly, keeping negativity. Okay, exactly. So to me, what happens with the mind is that, maybe you've seen my other scopes, there is this triangle that happens. And so usually the cycle that most anxious people live under, and I've lived in this, is something happens which is called a trigger. You're familiar with probably a lot of these terms. A trigger enters the mind, and in a matter of milliseconds, nanoseconds, you're in this second place of the triangle called the alert, or the fire, danger, danger. So immediately the mind goes from something that entered your mind, a thought mostly, mostly a thought. Even if it's something that you see, it becomes a thought in a matter of milliseconds. And it's the thought. That's why I love the scriptures say to keep every thought captive. I love that analogy. But anyway, and then immediately it goes to fire. And then after the fire begins the acting out. And so the person acts out from that panic. And that can be from substance abuse to anger to calling all your friends to panic. I have a friend, and her acting out, her husband left her about 7-8 years ago and basically told her after 8 years of marriage that I just don't love you anymore. And so now that she's trying to date and kind of get her life back together, she has 2 daughters. Every time that her boyfriend or somebody that she's with leaves the room or goes on a business trip, she calls incessantly. So that's her acting out as control, basically. So that's the typical pattern. Now, the non-anxious pattern, or what I call the gozo pattern, the joy pattern, is the following. It starts with awareness. So whenever that moment hits, now I'm getting into some awesome teaching, and I'm glad you asked. The moment that trigger hits, the anxious person, instead of going into the normal cycle, they become self-aware. In other words, they say to themselves, okay, Bruce is here. And I can talk more about Bruce later. Basically, I recommend to all of my clients that they name their anxiety a name. Bruce, some people call it my B. I had another client called it Mr. Dizzy. The point is, you want to separate yourself from the anxiety so that you're not seeing that you are anxious. You're feeling anxious, but it's not who you are. So anyway, the idea is that Bruce comes into your life, right? That's the first thing, is awareness. And let me tell you, self-awareness is 99% of the healing. And it's the hardest thing because the mind is trained. And most of us, since we were 5, 6, whenever that trauma may have happened, we've been trained to go from trigger immediately to danger, to fire, or as I call it in Spanish, en fuego, you're on fire. And so to break that first line is the work that we do. And that's why I spend 12 weeks with the people that I see. In my video course is the same thing. It's 4 videos. Basically, it's 12 weeks, but it's in 4 videos. Just primarily, and I do other things, to help people just to become aware. The second thing, the second corner, corner of the triangle, of the joy triangle, is after self-awareness, is to tell yourself the truth. Or as I also call it, is calm the feeling down. And there's a whole set of practices, from music therapy to mantras to exercise, but mostly it's mental work. It's what you speak to yourself. And that's the second one, calm the feeling down. And then lastly is distraction, or basically having a plan. Because the anxious person, this is sort of like to get you off that cliff per se of anxiety, of tension, or if you are home or you don't want to, maybe have social anxiety. I would have to see the specific case. But again, you eventually need a long-term plan. And that plan basically is this triangle, but I actually go more in depth into how do you come up with a plan that fits your particular situation. So that's the quick of it, Christine, in terms of kind of what I do in terms of the healing work. And it's a beautiful thing. And that is what we need to be talking about, so that you, in your case, can be the nonprofit leader. Now, Christine, are you already involved? Absolutely. Are you already involved in a nonprofit? Tell me a little bit. I know we're, quote, texting here, so it's maybe slower. But tell me a little bit more about your particular nonprofit work. Tell me, what's your position? Tell me a little bit about it. Just maybe write a little bit there about it as I drink my coffee. Yummy. We should call each other so we can talk. Director, Paranormal Investigation. Okay. So you're doing significant work. I mean, that is beautiful. And so your work is life. I'm sure there are other things that are life, but my guess, or my first question to you, if we were, let's say, to talk and have a session together, this is what I do in my program and in my book and all the things that I do. The first thing, again, I don't just talk about intuitive helping kids. High five. I can't do an emoji while I'm periscoping, but I'll do some live emojis. Beautiful work. But when I work with people, whether on video or whether I'm doing a conference, whatever, different things that I'm doing, what I talk about, it's not just how to be less anxious, exactly, high five, but the ACL experience, which is really joy. Again, so what I ask people as part of the healing is, what's your great adventure? Most people have no idea. So we do work. We do some research. We go back into those childhood dreams. And then we talk about grace in crisis. Because most people that I talk to, in terms of anxiety or broken marriages or those triggers that bring about the anxiety or the depression or the fear, because it's not just anxiety, it's also fear, depression. It's the fad, as I call it, or the foo-foo fighters, family of origin. You have this kind of mixture of fear, anxiety, and depression. These are like first cousins. And so it's most people that I talk to, they don't recognize the grace. As Mr. Rogers said, or his mom used to say to him whenever there was a disaster, remember the quote is, look for the helpers. I'm a big Mr. Rogers fan. Oh man, I think that guy is a genius. Ahead of his time, talk about media, wow. Anyway, so that's the idea of finding grace. And so I help people to find the grace in their crisis. And what exactly does that mean? And then, to me, A plus C equals L. As we go back and remember our adventure, and we discover that, or we rediscover it, plus grace in the crisis, so that's A plus C, it equals L, which is love. And really, love is where we all want to be. Is to love well. Is to love deeply. It's to love yourself. It's to love a cause. It's to give yourself to children at risk. It's to give yourself to a church that loves you, that you love. It's to give yourself to family that need your help. It's to give yourself, but not from a place of crisis or a place of not knowing your trauma or only seeing it as negative, but from a place, and this is not a perfect formula, okay? So this is not like, hey, boom, 3 steps to $1 million. Okay, that does not exist. But we're talking about a life journey of adventure plus crisis equals love. We do everything for free. And so part of the business advice that I give, so I do a back end to all that I do up front. The back end of my training, I don't publicize this too much yet. I do it more with this very people that I work with that ask me, is I talk about their business plan. And so that would be a thing that obviously you've figured out, or I'm sure it's grants. I worked at USC for 3 years. It's USC here, the Trojans here in LA. And I worked in development for 3 years. I was helping all the different nonprofits. I worked at the church on campus. And the biggest question that we always ask is, how is your grant writing? How is your donor base? Exactly. And there are people that are amazingly skilled at grant writing. I'm not, but I have a huge awareness of what it means and what it takes to sustain a nonprofit. And I think, this is just my opinion, okay, that I think all nonprofits need to turn into for-profit businesses. That's really my 2 cents. Every nonprofit needs to turn itself into a for-profit business with a heart of compassion. Every nonprofit. If I could do anything and just snap my fingers, is every nonprofit needs to be turned into a for-profit business with a heart. It's that simple. And it's not just an opinion. It's based on what we see globally. as far as less donors, less, the donor base and people giving towards things that move their hearts. You know what moves people's hearts? Is you doing good work. Is you making an impact in people's lives. Exactly. So, Gososcope Land and Christine and all of you who may watch this on YouTube later today or wherever I'm going to post this, Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, thank you so much for watching. I am so thankful to be talking about these themes because it's where we live. Thank you, Christine, from Florida. Thank you, because this is the kind of stuff that is real. This is real. I'm a real person. You're a real person. This is really happening. This is not some made up belief video. This is real. I'm really here, live, amazing through this Gososcope. And so you can email me, Christine, at trig@davidtrigg.com. Trig, as in T-R-I-G, at davidtrigg.com. Or on Facebook, you can message me. My Facebook page is David Trigg, or my private or my personal page is David Trigueros LA. So the name is kind of long, but I think it's in my Twitter handle, I think. Trigueros, exactly, Mr. Gozo's neighbor. I know, Mr. Roger, wow. I watched, I think it was over a week, about 20 hours of interviews with him. Just learning of what's in here. I mean, at least to get a glimpse of this man's genius. And especially, you know why I love him? Because he's a healer and because he did it through TV. Through what we're doing now with digital media. Amazing. Thank you again. Please go to my website, davidtrigg.com. Exactly. Go to my podcast, all there, davidtrigg.com/podcast, so you can listen to I do it 3 times a week, a daily podcast, a weekly podcast. And so thank you again. Check out my Facebook page. On Instagram, I post a lot of images that relate to this content. My Instagram is David Trigg. My Twitter handle is David Trigg LA. Thank you again. Thank you so much, Christine, and everyone else. Have a great, great rest of this day. I will see you next time.